And now to the other big story that would be number one, as we tend to say these days, if not for everything you just saw. This is the legal checkmate that New York feds are trying to put on President Trump, at least through the guy who ran his campaign, Paul Manafort, because these new charges Donald Trump cannot pardon New York DA Cy Vance, making this aggressive move before Manafort's lawyers could even leave court yesterday. And tonight, we've actually assembled, take a look, 3 Cy Vance insiders. Each of these former assistant DAs have interacted with Vance professionally and know a lot about how this DA office runs. I'm going to speak to you in a moment. Now, just as Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, and Mike Flynn had to learn a lot about Bob Mueller when he was appointed and started investigating them, well, today, Manafort and anyone with potential criminal exposure in his orbit are going to learn a lot about Mr. Vance. It's easy to forget how Mueller went from basically a low-key former official to a sudden national prosecutor of intrigue, not only in politics, but in our culture as well.
I'm so in love with Bob Mueller. He looks to me like Superman, like Captain America, like justice has finally arrived.
I think Bob Mueller's an American hero.
Mueller's like Batman, putting together the Flash, Green Lantern, and Wonder Woman to create the Obstruction of Justice League.
Now, that superhero talk is deliberate overstatement, but prosecutors can certainly inspire imagination. The Harvey Dent character in Batman is based on the New York DA, which is the office Cy Vance heads. And if Donald Trump's biggest superpower in the Mueller probe is the potential use of pardons, a presidential power that cannot be checked legally by the Congress or typically the courts, this real-life Harvey Dent then has a power larger than that in New York. Vance's indictment of Manafort is the first time throughout this entire Mueller probe and the whole Trump presidency, when you think about it, that a former Trump aide has actually been hit with charges that his old boss, Donald Trump, cannot pardon. Keeping that in mind, we turn to an all-star panel, 3 former assistant DAs for Manhattan. Moshe Horn, a criminal defense attorney now. Harlan Levy, a former chief deputy attorney general for New York State, who first discussed this issue when we reported on potential investigations in August 2017, right at this table. And former federal prosecutor Daniel Alonzo, and a former number 2 under Cy Vance.
Right.
So let's start with you. We're now basically a day and a half out of this. How much of this is a pardon-proof strategy, and could it go beyond the defendant Manafort and include other people?
Well, in some ways it's a pardon-proof strategy because the president clearly can't pardon somebody who's been convicted of a state crime. So in that sense it is, but there are certainly hurdles for the DA's office to overcome in getting a conviction here. I mean, there are double jeopardy concerns. The DA has thought about them very, very carefully and has a strategy to get around them. But
the DA that you worked under,
yes,
you were number 2.
That's right.
You were the Rod Rosenstein to his Jeff Sessions.
Something like that.
But Cy's not exactly Jeff Sessions. We'll leave it at that. When you look at how he prepares for a case like this, does he kind of throw it out there and then figure out later whether he can win the double jeopardy part, or do they strategize about that?
Oh, no, he strategizes a lot. Cy's a very careful and deliberative prosecutor. He would very much have gathered the smartest people in the office in the room to deal with these issues and come up with a strategy to overcome the double jeopardy.
He is thoughtful. He is cerebral. He has no interest in falling on his face. He has an interest in doing things that succeed and are planned and that will work. That's the way that he approaches his work.
Do you think if he wins, he could get a larger jail term for Manafort than he currently has at 7 years?
Yes, I think that he could. If he wins, there are some double jeopardy hurdles to get over, but I think that he's got at the least a credible set of claims on double jeopardy in terms of the way he's thought this through.
Harlan, you were that rare thing in our field, a pretty humble lawyer. I mean, you're mellow, you're soft-spoken, but all of you have had great positions. You were identifying this and walking our viewers through the whole thing when we first reported this in August 2017. And all we knew then was we'd done reporting that there was looking at an investigation. We were a long way from an indictment, and we were a long way from the Mueller progress. Take a look at you walking us through this in August 2017.
What state prosecutors can deal with, whether they be attorney generals or local DAs, are state crimes. They're limited. So to the extent that there's a big national or international investigation, that's less within their scope and their target.
As you explained, it's not like the New York DA has the ability to just go after everyone accused of collusion.
Right.
So how do you look at the way he's gone after Manafort?
I think the way that he's gone after Manafort is by focusing on state crimes committed in New York. He's focused on residential mortgage fraud, very different from bank fraud. I think that's part of his strategy for getting around the double jeopardy issues. And the other crimes that he's alleged, the falsification of records, again, a classic state crime. So that takes this and puts it in his bailiwick. That gives him a much better chance of succeeding.
So you almost wonder, okay, all this praise for Cy Vance. You have called this a slam dunk case against Manafort.
If they can get over double jeopardy.
If they get over double jeopardy. It makes you wonder, well, what do people who have to go against Cy Vance say? I mean, it's not like he wins every case. It's not like he has an unblemished record. You are familiar with him, and as a criminal defense attorney in New York, you've gone against him. What's the other side of this? Does Manafort have a way to beat this in New York?
The answer is yes. First, I would agree with Dan. The first line of defense will be double jeopardy, and I think there are very credible claims made. To go back to your earlier point, I guarantee you this is a great office. They have gamed out this entire case. They have looked at every angle. They don't take a case like this lightly. As a criminal defense lawyer, you go in knowing that. So you're facing an uphill battle. You would face double jeopardy. I try to appeal to the judge's sympathies that the system is being gamed when they come out an hour after the sentencing and announce a new indictment and try to show it's politically motivated. Those are the kind of angles you would try to hit.
But does politically motivated get charges thrown out? I mean, double jeopardy can get your charges thrown out.
True.
Because you know why? Double jeopardy is twice as powerful as single jeopardy.
Well done.
What was that?
Jeopardy?
A terrible, terrible double jeopardy. I wanted to get it in there. Go on.
It worked. First line of defense, double jeopardy, no question. I think there's credible claims, and I think a lot of judges would listen to it with somewhat of a receptive ear.
So give it to us in plain English.
Plain English, if I have a client in federal court now who's maybe taken a plea on something, I would be very nervous. Is there anything they can do to get him in a state court now? Like Harlan just said, how do I protect my clients and ever take a plea knowing maybe there's an angle they're going to try to indict him in a city attorney now? That would really concern me as a defense lawyer, and that's what I would tell the judge. How do we go forward?
I think it's credible. I think, does he win at the end of the day? Does he get by the appellate hurdles? I don't know, but I think that he's got a good case because what he has done is he has pursued crimes that are state crimes that have different elements than federal crimes. And also, he's got state interests as distinct from federal interests.
Right.
So those factors
Well, one of the
give him a
counts,
shot.
everyone can understand, wait a minute, wouldn't seem fair if you're really getting hit for the exact same thing. But one of the counts is misleading New York. New York has an interest in that in the same way that Mueller says, you lie to my FBI agents, you're undermining the whole system. And New York has its own interest in that. I want to look at this in the wider context, Daniel, because so much of this is different. We're always comparing, what did we learn from Nixon? What did we learn from Archibald Cox? This is totally different. So let's just take a moment to take this in on the screen. When you think about all the other big federal probes of sitting presidents, we can put this up, and you look at what happened. The pardon power in each of these big cases was used after the probe. The president himself getting one from Ford. Iran-Contra ending with pardons. George W. Bush coming in and commuting the sentence, using his pardon power. Now with Trump, in this Mueller probe and Manafort, we haven't seen what he's going to do. But this is the first time, at a very simple, basic level, that Mueller's backed up by, boom, the man you guys know and work with, Cy Vance, as a checkmate. I mean, do you view this as sort of doing something that's important for the rule of law in America, which is having a way to ensure against what many people would view as the potential abuse and what has been historically often the outcome of these probes, pardoning your own friends, which I don't think was what the founders all thought was the best use of that power?
Well, it's a good strategy to protect against it, but let's not forget, nobody's been pardoned yet, right? So there hasn't been an abuse in the way you say it yet. But
well, I appreciate your rigor, but I would nuance it a little bit. Donald Trump is not a friend of the Bushes, but he already added a pardon on top of the commutation of Scooter Libby. It was widely seen by everyone in Washington as a message. He attacks these witnesses as rats. He's mused openly on Twitter that he can pardon himself. His family and his aides have talked about how this is a Trump card, and he's not a normal president. So while he has not technically done it in this probe, when you look at Arpaio and Libby, at the end of this, to help himself, does he use it or abuse the pardon power? A lot of people are looking at that.
If I were your political analyst, I'd probably say it's probably going to happen. So I agree with you there. But I'm not your political analyst. But from a legal point of view, this is clearly designed to prevent that kind of miscarriage of justice. So
and is that something that's good for the rule of law? I suppose I'm curious if you think.
Yeah, I think it's probably good for the rule of law. It's very unusual. Let's not forget.
I think that We'll see where it goes. But it could go in a way that is ultimately very good for the rule of law.
I think we have to be very thoughtful because I think this could be very good for the rule of law or it could not, depending on how it's used. And I think we have to look at this in a very thoughtful, case-by-case way and consider what would happen if it was misused.
I just want to be clear. I got a maybe, a we'll see, and a who knows, because you're all very careful lawyers. You've been doing this a lot longer than a lot of people, and I appreciate your rigor and joining us for this special discussion. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.